On the 24th of February, President Biden announced a long set of sanctions, or economic penalties as they're known, to be imposed on Russia in an attempt to deter them from furthering their attack on Ukraine. These sanctions included limiting their ability to transact in dollars, pounds, euros, and yen, cutting off the largest Russian bank from the US financial system, and freezing assets in the United States. But one thing was left out of this list, which left many people wondering, which was why wasn't Russia removed from SWIFT? So speaking of the devil, as I was editing this video, it actually so happens that the EU, UK, Canada, and US have pledged to remove Russia from the interbank messaging system SWIFT. However, the information presented in today's video is still very relevant and basically outlines what's going to happen or what might happen when Russia does get removed from SWIFT. So let's get on with the video. So today we're going to define what SWIFT is. We're also going to discuss the reasons why Russia has not been cut off from SWIFT as of right now, and what that economically means for Russia and for the rest of the world. Additionally, I'll also cover what might happen if Russia does get removed from SWIFT. So if for some reason you're watching this in the future and Russia has been since ejected from SWIFT, this video should still be relevant, and we'll talk about what it all means. So SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. That last word, telecommunication, is key here. SWIFT actually isn't a system where money gets transferred, it's actually just a messaging system. Established in 1973, it connects more than 11,000 financial institutions in over 200 countries. When one bank wants to send money to another bank internationally, they're going to use SWIFT to communicate the payment information from one bank account to another. So SWIFT doesn't actually move your funds from one bank to another, but it is essential plumbing or a backbone of the international financial system to get your funds transferred across borders. A lot of countries use SWIFT to trade things internationally, such as importing and exporting commodities, which will be a key piece of information here for later in this video. SWIFT has become the international industry standard for banks, and SWIFT was founded in Belgium. Now, because it is headquartered in Belgium, it needs to follow Belgian law, which requires it to follow EU regulations. The EU is partially the reason why SWIFT was not cut off from Russia already. When Biden was asked by the press why SWIFT was not included in Thursday's sanctions, here's how he responded.
The sanctions that we have proposed on all their banks have of equal consequence, maybe more consequence than SWIFT, number one. Number two, it is always an option, but right now that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take.
You'll notice that he said that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take. According to Reuters back on Thursday, quote, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Germany, which is a key trading partner of Russia, opposed cutting off Russia's access to the payment system at this point. Now that, while, quote, the foreign ministers of the Baltic states, once ruled from Moscow but now members of NATO and the EU, called on Thursday to stop Russia's access to SWIFT. So you can see that there's some disagreement within the EU itself for cutting off SWIFT. In fact, this situation is ongoing, with the latest reports as of Friday that Germany was more accepting and open to the idea of the disconnection of Russia from the SWIFT system. The initial hesitation from Germany is stemmed from their reliance on Russian gas. Removing Russia from SWIFT means that it's going to be impossible for funds to flow between the countries. If payments can't go through for the export of gas and you're a country heavily reliant on Russian gas, well, you can see where the problem lies. By removing SWIFT from Russia, the collateral damage to EU countries that are heavily reliant on Russian gas and oil is going to be devastating. Just take a look at this map right here. Nearly 30% of the EU's gas comes from Russia, and many countries are dependent on those pipelines. By reducing the gas supply in Europe, prices are going to climb internationally across the global market as well. If SWIFT was cut off, Russia could theoretically then just sell their gas to other countries that are willing to deal with cumbersome payment methods in order to get it, so it might not be a solution anyway. Another issue is wheat. Ukraine and Russia combine for 25% of global wheat exports, and other commodities will be affected as well. Corn, palladium, platinum, and aluminum, or as the Brits will say, aluminium, that will also be affected. So the removal of SWIFT is going to mean that more than just oil is affected globally. This could also mean higher prices for your food as well. Okay, next up, quote, other EU member states are reluctant to make such a move because while it would hit Russian banks hard, it would make it tough for European creditors to get their money back, and Russia has, in any case, been building up an alternative payment system. Let's discuss both of these. It was hard to find a number on exactly how much Russia owed to European countries, but what I found was that their total external debt is around $400 $278 billion according to Trading Economics. According to Financial Times, they owe $121 billion to international banks, and this is a problem. European banks also have money owed to them by Russian civilians, and EU citizens have money in Russian banks as well, so the problem is going in many different directions. The other item mentioned in that quote is the use of an alternative payment system. About 8 years ago, Russia developed what's called SPFS, which is a SWIFT alternative system for Russian banks only. This system was started as a result of, you guessed it, a threat to disconnect Russia from the SWIFT system back in 2014 by the United States. Compared to SWIFT, the Russian SPFS system faces a number of challenges, especially higher transaction costs, and it mostly works only within Russia. Since the majority of banks that use it are Russian, this alternative payment system would not really be able to communicate with the outside world, and therefore I don't think it's a legitimate argument against cutting off SWIFT. According to an expert on Russia and Russia-Chinese relations, so far only a dozen foreign banks are using SPFS, including one Chinese bank, so there's not that much adoption there either. Okay, so far in this video, we've outlined the argument for removing Russia from SWIFT, the main points being, number one, it's going to have global economic downsides due to gas and other exports. Number two, Russia owes money to EU creditors, and number three, they have an alternative payment system anyway, which we ruled out as a real threat, but we'll leave it on this list. So what were to happen if Russia is actually banned from SWIFT? If they were banned from SWIFT, it is one of the most severe sanctions that you can impose on a country, and some sources have even called it a financial nuclear option. But this still wouldn't prevent Russia from doing international or cross-border transactions. According to Adam Smith, yes, his name is actually Adam Smith, he's an international lawyer who focuses on international trade and worked with Obama. Quote, SWIFT is a communications platform, not a financial payment system. If you remove Russia from SWIFT, you're removing them from a key artery of finance, but they can use pre-SWIFT tools like telephone, telex, or email to engage in bank-to-bank transactions. So while cutting off Russia from SWIFT is bad news for Russia and possibly the rest of the world, it would just make transactions a lot more slower and more cumbersome for them, but not impossible. If Russia is banned from SWIFT, we have one precedent from 10 years ago that we can examine to view the potential effects that it might have. And that was the disconnection of SWIFT, which happened to Iran back in 2012. It was back then that the West hoped that disconnecting SWIFT would pressure Iran into curbing its nuclear activities at the time. You can see by this chart that in 2012, when they were disconnected from SWIFT, Iran's crude oil exports fell dramatically. From 2.5 million barrels per day to just over 1 million barrels per day in 2014, only recovering when sanctions were lifted in 2016. Iran's other exports and imports were affected as well, and the 2012 SWIFT ban was seen as a key piece to bringing Iran to the negotiating table, which led to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Now, if Russia is cut off from SWIFT, it's not a guarantee that any behavior will be curbed. Some will argue that the current sanctions, including limiting Russia's ability to transact in dollars, is far more effective because it essentially does the same thing, if not exceeds SWIFT in its impact. We actually don't know what's going to happen, and it's an ongoing situation. Now, I'm going to continue to monitor the situation and make videos on anything that needs explaining. I'm also going to leave some links in the description below on how you can help Ukraine from afar by donating if you would like to. My thoughts and my hearts are with the Ukrainian people. I know that it's a really tough situation right now, and I'm hoping for a resolution soon. It would mean a lot if you guys shared this video with a friend to basically explain what SWIFT is, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.